everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall too everywhere. How is everybody? Happy week. Oh, man. I mean, it has been a crazy week, right? And I keep saying this every week. It's been a crazy week. One of these days, I'm going to pop on the air with you and say, wow, nothing at all happened this week. That's so weird. But until then, yeah, a lot's going on in the world. You know, we've got a lot of planetary retrogrades. We've got people trying to figure out which way is up. I mean, we literally are trying to figure out who as a species we are right now. It's a thing. It's a big deal. So if you're feeling a little tired, just make sure to take time to rest. Take time for yourself. And I know that sounds so cliche, right? Yet, literally, gang, I read for, hundreds of people, thousands of people, lots of people a year. And one of the most predominant messages for people, especially from their angels, is that we really do not take the time for ourselves that we should be taking. I mean, we just flat don't. We don't take the time. So that ends up being pretty harsh for us, over time, because there's only one you. There's only one you for your family. There's only one you everywhere in the world. And so just remember, gang, I know it gets pretty hectic and I know we have a lot of responsibilities out there, but just remember there's only one you. So take the time to rest. Believe me, nothing's going to fall apart. Very rarely is something going to fall apart in 5 seconds. That just without our participation. That's a very rare thing. Unless someone is drowning, you can sit it out for 5 minutes and rest. And today's podcast is a walk into the paranormal for me, and I love that because I have a tremendous amount of my career that has been spent in the paranormal realm. And it was such a big deal in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s to go ghost hunting. And people are still ghost hunters now, yet I'm more speaking about a big deal in media. It was a really big deal in media. So, when I would get asked as a psychic to come in, and I can't tell you how many TV pilots that I did that never launched, because you shoot a pilot, and TV is a really complicated, it's a crazy complicated thing, gang. We've got Road Angel going, and it's so amazing. And I'm so excited to have you all be able to see Road Angel. And of course, the minute I can tell you where it's going to be released and when you can watch, the minute I get the green light to do that, I will. Yet what I can share about you about Road Angel and television in the meantime is that TV is a pretty rough industry. It's rough. You don't just go out and make a TV show. And back in the early to mid to even sort of the semi-late 2000s, I was the psychic, who was going into these haunted places and talking to the spirits because that's what television wanted me to do. That was literally my big fat job, was to go in there, talk about a haunted location, talk to the spirit, translate for the spirit. And heck, that's no skin off my nose, gang. I translate for angels. I translate for deceased people. I translate for spirits, off-worlders. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If it's a being, I'm happy to translate for it. And so back in the I like to call it the golden era of paranormal TV. Back in the golden era of paranormal TV. The producers would have us come in and we would set up and we would determine where the ghosts were. And it was about in that time frame, about 2009-ish, when I shot and directed Montgomery House, The Perfect Haunting. And I've had you guys writing to me saying, when is this available? And we've been having difficulties, believe it or not, just with the DVD production, because DVD production is on the downturn. Everything is digital right now. So rather than going that direction, we're going to digitize Montgomery House and go ahead and put it up so people can actually rent it, and it's kind of a cool deal. And that hasn't happened yet, but it's on our to-do list. It's on my team's to-do list of things to do. So back in the day, I would go in and we would basically deal with a haunted location. And one of the things that I always found so startling was that in the more sensationalized days of paranormal television, which was during that time frame, you had very well-meaning producers that were trying to stir the pot and make sure that whatever content you were creating on that paranormal TV show was as startling as possible. Okay. So I'd be walking around and I might have a little earpiece in and, I've got a producer yelling at me in my ear saying things like, okay, act scared now. Or, okay, can you look up and look startled? And I generally just blew off that line producer because I didn't want to do that and it was disingenuous and I wasn't going to do it. However, I still got called onto these shows in spite of my innate defiance to pretend there was a spirit in the room. And one of the things that I ran across on a regular basis, and I still do, I do a tremendous amount of work with spirits who have not crossed over. I just don't talk about it as much because I've been doing so much angelic work, and the angels work with people. And a lot of times when I go in to work with a ghost, I'm working with their angels too, because those ghosts still have angels. It's not like just because we die, we quit having angels, right? So one of the things that I find so interesting is when you go in to speak to these ghosts, sometimes they're cool. Most of the time they're cool. Sometimes they're not cool. Sometimes they're gnarly. And so today's podcast is it's a subject that I love. It's a subject I hardly get to talk about anymore, which kind of makes me sad because I think it really nods to the transcendence of the spirit and the soul. Yet old style paranormal television made ghost hunting this big spooky thing, and it was all about the evidence and can you get a ghost on camera or can you get something, being thrown at you from the spirit or whatever. And even when we shot Montgomery House, and Montgomery House was originally supposed to air on a TV network, which shall not be named, who decided not to purchase it. It was supposed to be a 2-night special, like a Halloween special, and at the last minute, the network decided not to purchase it. Yet here we had all of this creepy stuff in Montgomery House, The Perfect Haunting, evidence that we caught on camera. I mean, some really creepy stuff, clear down to spirits saying, "Get out." I mean, really, we actually caught the quintessential "get out" and big black blobs, demonic blobs rolling around the basement we caught on camera. I mean, we caught weird entities up in the attic on camera with Montgomery House. And I honest to God think that that's what kind of freaked out the network that was going to buy it, because they were looking at this stuff like, yeah, if we put this on TV, then everybody's going to be terrified. And we're going to be looking at this stuff going, oh my God, this is terrifying. That's creepy. So, one of the things that I wanted to bring forward was that just because we deal in the realm of the paranormal, it doesn't mean every single ghost is scary or bad. And so today's podcast is what makes a good ghost go bad. Because periodically you do run into those beings that have been around, stuck in between the ethers too long, and it just makes us weird, gang. I'm not kidding. If we as a person get locked in a bathroom for the rest of our lives, it's going to make you crazy, okay? So if a person crosses over, and maybe that person crosses over and they don't understand A, how they died, or B, they understand they're dead, but they're afraid to go on because they're afraid that what's going to happen with them is terrifying, like they might go to hell or whatever. We can make choices to not cross over even after we die. Now listen, as somebody who talks to lots of dead people and angels, I highly suggest that when the spacesuit wears out, when your ticket is punched, when it's time for you to go on to the next incarnation, I highly recommend you just go, okay? Don't hang around. I mean, really, there's really nothing left to see here, people. Keep on moving the line. once we're out of the spacesuit, we have such an enormous life to live in that particular ether, which at that time is the afterlife. Yet I have encountered some spirits that just don't want to move on. Now, sometimes when a human gets out of the spacesuit and that human was very, very married to a location, that's their idea of heaven. And more often than not, I would go into a location, and especially with some of these TV pilots or these, these projects that were being shot in the 2000s, and I'd walk into a haunted location, and I'd run into a spirit. That spirit wasn't mean or mad. It was just hanging out, man. It wanted to hang out in its indigenous environment. So then you've got some producer yelling and screaming in your ear saying, do something, make it scary, blah. And I can't get on board with that, which I will tell you a story related to that later in the podcast. However, what makes a good ghost go bad? One of the things is shame and guilt. And this is one of the reasons that I really, as a person in this field who deals with beings who are ethereal, and especially with angels, I really work hard to get the point across to people that we do not need to bring shame with us, not even in this life. I mean, it's good to be contrite. It's good to have remorse. It's good to have accountability. It's obviously, we don't want to be, weird, conscienceless sociopaths. We don't want that. Yet shame, gang, I'm not even kidding. It will create within us a dead stop to moving on to the incarnation of love or heaven, okay? Because when we die, we have this opportunity to leave all of our earthly woes, all of our garbage, all of our stuff with the body. We have this opportunity to leave it with the body. If we don't leave it with the body, if we don't leave our stuff, our spiritual lessons behind in this three-dimensional incarnation, if we choose not to, go into the light, Carol Ann, if we choose not to go forward and we block ourselves out mentally and we're still too busy wrestling with our shame issues, the vibration of shame, I'm not even kidding, it literally is the iron gate that does not allow us to cross into love or perfection. And it is our choice to maintain a relationship with that shame to the point that we can't actually move forward in our lives. Now, this is one of the reasons that the angelic realm talks tirelessly about giving up our relationship with shame. Again, we can be accountable. We can feel remorse. We can feel regret. Yet to live beneath the weight of shame creates it's a buzzkill, man. It creates this roadblock to going any further in love. Literally, it's not a good deal. So some of the gnarliest people, disembodied people, ghosts that I have ever encountered in my life were ghosts who really kept their shame close to their heart. So my job as somebody who can, hear the ghosts and speak to the ghosts and feel the ghosts, and that's just a trip for all of you empaths out there. How many of you have ever gone through a situation where you go into a location? It could be like Virginia City, Montana, which is a living ghost town. There's way more disembodied people hanging out and partying in Virginia City than there are people who are physically alive. How many of you empaths have gone into a haunted location and all of a sudden felt exceptionally sad? You know what I mean? Like you get that really gross feeling in your stomach, like you're just going to die inside and you don't know why. That is the empathic resonance that is coming off of that spirit that's still packing around a tremendous amount of, generally it is shame that is the gatekeeper. And again, it's not like if you're feeling shame when you die that heaven's going to spit you out. it's not that dramatic, okay? It's more like the vibration of the shame prohibits the amalgamation of the spiritual particle matter that is the soul from becoming one with that 5 and 7 and 9D vibration of perfection, or what we like to call heaven. Shame is a very low vibration, and it's a little rough for people. So what I get the opportunity to do when I'm dealing with spirits is to talk to people at times about why they are disembodied and still feeling so much shame. And what's really a trip is to hear these spirits tell their tales. The burdening of the soul is huge with these spirits. It's huge. So then I have the opportunity to try to translate for their angels. Now one would be thinking, why the hell does a spirit need a human who is still in a body to translate for their angels? Because, technically speaking, shouldn't that spirit be able to commune with their angels directly? Well, the answer would be yes. Yet what I'll tell you is, when we have a human being who gets out of the spacesuit called the body and is running around in our ether sphere, it doesn't want to cross over. The human being will not go with its angelic emissaries to the other side. It just won't go. Like that really stubborn guy in the bar who's had way too much Mad Dog 2020, way too much cheap Everclear, and he just won't leave. So you've got the bouncer over there saying, hey, look, buddy, you need to head out, okay? You need to be gone, bye-bye. B-U-H, bye. However, that person is afraid that if they go with the bouncer, they're going to end up in the parking lot. They're not going to be able to find their car. They can't find their friends. They're going to be lost. So when I'm dealing with spirits who are packing a lot of fear or a lot of shame, they're afraid that if they go with those angels, they're going to end up getting a one-way ticket to the big old hell house downstairs. They think they're going to get their ticket punched to go see the devil. They're going to be pinned to a tree of fire for the rest of their natural life. And it's amazing to actually converse with these spirits and have them tell you what they think is going to happen to them in the afterlife because they've done some really super sketchy stuff in life. It's a little weird. So there is a misconception, in my opinion, and my job is to bring light to the spiritual universe. In my opinion, there's a bit of a misconception that the minute we die, we go straight to heaven. The minute we die, we get out of our body, and there's this massive, what looks like a big old blinding light hitting us in the face like a big old beacon, except it's not something you're squinting into. It's just warm and white and amazing. And your angels come forward in that light, and that's when we're getting out of the body. We are literally birthing out of the third dimension into that fifth and seventh dimension. We are birthing into the realm of creation or perfection or love or the quantum field or heaven or whatever you want to call it. And there are some people that as we are going into this light have this very conscious panic attack about how they live their life. So if you could imagine a baby coming down the birth canal and all of a sudden seeing the light kind of crowning as the baby's making its way down, and all of a sudden it just grabs onto the cervix and it's like, no, I'm not going. Imagine the pain to the mom. And I'm sorry, ladies, to even put that out there, and please don't send me hate mail. However, that's literally what happens when we as a spirit are trying to be birthed into perfection and we don't go. When we freak out that we're going to end up burning in hell or whatever our freak out is, it actually pulls on the fabric of that birthing process. And those angels just have to kind of hang out and wait for us to decide to let go of that spiritual cervix and just fly on through into the next incarnation of our life, or to pull ourselves back through the portal and basically choose to run around as a disembodied spirit in this third dimension, even though we're a fifth and seventh dimension being. And I say fifth and seventh because it depends on what metaphysical modality you adhere to. Some people say the spirit realm is the 5th or the 7th, or heaven is the 9th, or whatever. However, we are running in an electromagnetic vibration once we're out of our body that's far faster than our 3rd dimension. So here we are as a spirit running around, and nobody sees us and nobody can touch us, and we can't really touch anything else. We have to work really hard to slow our matter down enough to manifest so people can see us. We have to work 9 times harder to be able to slow that matter down enough to actually physically touch anybody. Otherwise, we just move right through their particle matter. And that individual is, of course, going to weirdly feel kind of a kind of creepy feeling coming up the back of their neck as we, the spirit being, rolls through their particle matter and goes between their cell structure. So people can feel ghosts. It doesn't matter if you're psychic or not. Human beings can feel a disembodied spirit because that disembodied spirit is electromagnetic energy, and human beings can detect EMF. So what makes a good spirit go bad? Well, again, we talk about shame. We also talk about the fact that, those spirits will spend a lot of time just wandering around, maybe seeing other spirits who are on their same fast-moving wavelength, because it's not like they're the only one there. I mean, there's angels following them around, trying to get them to leave. Half the time, those people see these angels as monsters, these big, bright, white. I've talked to spirits who have a lot of shame in what they did in life, child molesters, rapists, people who killed their family members, and they die. And these angels are trying to bring them to heaven or trying to bring them to the next incarnation. And these folks are panicking because they see these beings as these flaming giant monsters that are coming after them all the time. And they see them as demons because not like demons with horns, yet they look at this giant, powerful light being. And angels do kind of look a little funky, gang. I have to tell you, I've been painting angels for people. And one of the things that comes through in my painting of angels is that if the angel wishes to manifest in a humanoid way, to basically have some sort of connection with its human being, then it will. Yet a lot of these angels are pure energy. So they may give me part of a face, or they may give me somewhat part of a body just to connect with that human. Yet they are literally just dimensional light. That's really amazing. I have this good friend, and I painted her angel, and she was hilarious. She goes, "Hey, are you just going to give me a white canvas?" Because, get it? Like a big white angel, right? And, they represent themselves very specifically for people. And it's a challenge for me to paint those beings. Yet sometimes they're a little creepy looking, in my opinion. There are some angel paintings that I've sent out to people, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get a pipe bomb in the mail for sending this. Somebody's going to get this and say, this is the angel that walks with my heart. Are you kidding me? Yet these angels are powerful. And they don't look like these Roman soldiers in fluffy, puffy uniforms with perfect Aryan skin and blue eyes and curly hair. I mean, I suppose they could look like that, but that's really not what they look like in their indigenous format. They have light coming out and everything. So if you're somebody packing shame, if you're somebody who fears that you're going to go straight to hell, on a sled to hell with the devil. If you think that's where you're going, then you see this thing that does not look like a Roman soldier from the Aryan nation. It doesn't look like somebody's, Fire Island boy, blonde hair and long eyelashes and pouty mouth. It's a little disturbing, okay? So how does a good ghost go bad? Well, first of all, there is no such thing, truly, and it's very important that I make this distinction. There really is no such thing as a bad human spirit in terms of the spiritual physics periodic table. We can't be bad, okay? We can make crappy choices. We can really have mental illness that causes us to behave in psychotic ways that reflects very evil behaviors. But the very nature of our particle matter as a soul, gang, it's not evil. It's light, which is, it causes so much confusion for people. Because if we're beings of light, how could we do such terrible things to each other and blah, blah, blah. And that, good God, we do not have enough time in this podcast to cover all of the fine points of why we have our human lessons. Yet when I have encountered these spirits that are nasty, I mean, there are some nasty, twisted up, sideways, pickled in the brain or what's left of the consciousness spirits wandering around in the in-between ethers. It doesn't happen very often. Yet when I've encountered them, a lot of those spirits were humans who participated in religion, a lot of times the Christian religion, and they were in positions of leadership and did really sketchy stuff. And that's where I see the shame really come out. Now, not always. Obviously, we have all kinds of reasons people don't cross over. Yet when people fear the God that they purportedly served, and they did some really grotesque, crappy crap, people don't want to cross over into that. So they take their chances as a disembodied spirit. They roll the dice. They do not get just sucked like a Hoover vacuum cleaner into the belly of God after we die. That's where our soul wants to go. Yet we can actually thwart that process if we really wanted to. So you've got this. Let me tell a story. I had a spirit one time, and I was dealing with this spirit, and it came through, and I kid you not, it looked like an extra from a Stephen King movie. It was awful. It had one of those short, black, flat-rimmed hats on that you would find in a Amish or Quaker or puritanical religious leader in the 16 or 1700s. And this guy, I mean, by the time I actually got a chance to see him, because the spirit was hiding, he was hiding out in the ethers, which is really creepy. We'll get to that in a second. But was just kind of hanging off out of the way, and I'm interfacing with this guy's angels. And this was a dude who was in a home, and he was causing problems for the people who live there, obviously. So I got called in to deal with this dude. And this spirit would not come around me at all. But you know, like have you ever gone camping and it's dark and you've got the fire roaring and crackling in the middle, and maybe the couples that you're with are all sitting around the fire, and it gets to be kind of that point in the evening where it's late and you're listening to the crickets and the fire illuminates this pitch blackness out into the woods. And people start to stop talking around the fire, and everybody's just sitting there and staring at the flames. And all of a sudden, you're acutely aware that there is something just looking at you just outside of the perimeter of that light. It could be, maybe it's an owl. Maybe it's a cougar. Maybe it's a mountain lion. Maybe it's a bear or a deer, or maybe it's an elemental. Who knows, depending on where you're camping. But you can feel that gaze just out of the light. So this spirit of this disembodied holy man or preacher was just out of the light, and I could feel him looking at me, and I could feel the anger, and I could feel the rage, and I could feel this guy just thinking I was some occultist quack freakazoid who was interfacing with I was doing the devil's work, and it was creepy, okay? And I finally located this guy. Like, imagine sitting in a very, very large warehouse, and there's only one spotlight on you. And you can hear somebody walking around out there, but you can't see them. A lot of times these spirits that go bad, they don't want to be in the light. The light reminds them of what they were. The light reminds them of what is possible. And we see this same skulky behavior with people who are alive. I mean, think about all the people on the earth skulking around just outside of the light. They could change their behavior. They could volunteer. They could apply themselves for their highest good in their life. They could do all of it. But are they doing it? Hell no. They're skulking around on the outskirts, just kind of peering at everybody like a really bad Gollum knockoff. Everybody's trying to make the world a better place, and you feel this thing coming out of the darkness. Precious. Ah, my precious. I mean, this is what these spirits feel like when they go bad. So this guy was skulking around, and I finally keyed in on him. And I began a conversation with him, and I said, "Oh, I see you're a man of God." And the minute I said that, this guy, who, now considering he had been out of his body since the 1700s, so what, 1800s, 1900s, 2000s, 350 years, give or take some change, that this guy's been out of his body. And he comes rushing out of the dark at me with this rage, and he's got a little entourage with them. And the weird thing is, he doesn't notice the entourage, but I'm noticing the entourage. This man has been in torment. He's been in pain. He's been in fear. He's been in shame. He did horrible things to young Native American girls. He did horrible things to young Native American kids. We won't even get into it. Icky, gross you out kind of stuff. And here he comes, full tilt. And I mean, he looked like something out of the flippin' Dickens novels. I mean, this guy, he looked like the goat. He looked like Jacob Marley, with this gaping mouth and this screaming face and this rage. And he doesn't see these blobs of dark stuff that are pretty much glomming onto him and hanging around him. And it was for a tenth of a second, it was almost funny. Like, remember the Peanuts cartoon? Pigpen, okay? So here's this terrifying Jacob Marley looking thing with a creepy preacher hat coming out of this dark warehouse of space, so to speak. It was in a home, but this dark space, and he's got this weird cloud of darkness all around him. And what the weird cloud of darkness is the low vibration. That is, if you want to call it dark entities, demonic stuff, whatever, that eats the pain that comes off of all of us. Yet he couldn't see any of it. He saw it as the darkness. Yet I'm looking at this stuff just swarming around him. And the more mad he gets, the more of these clouds come in and sit down on him. And like I said, for a tenth of a second, I'm like, oh my God, you're spiritual pigpen. How seriously can I take this? This is weird. Yet, my job was to talk to this man, explain to him that he wasn't going to go screaming to hell for the things that he has done. Explain to him that he was living in this in-between ethereal vortex and hanging on to the old spiritual cervix and not passing on through to the next space of his life. And my job was to translate for his angels and talk to him about moving on. So, when a good spirit goes bad, there's a lot of denial there. So this guy's example, I'm trying to talk to him about what he did in life, and they're showing me what he did. And pretty soon, long story short, too late for that, but I'll get to the end. He basically ends up he goes from this grotesque configuration of what he sort of remembered himself looking like. And you have to remember, he's been out of his body for many, many years, and this is his idea of himself that he is presenting himself as. So he's looking kind of monsterish, his arms are a little too long, and his face is a little too long, and, we kind of forget what we're supposed to look like when we're out of the old spacesuit after a while. Even though we're looking at people, our form starts to just take on whatever, and so that was weird. However, my job was to explain to him that he didn't need to bring this shame and this fear with him. And it was enough to be accountable, and it was enough to have the remorse, and that he could experience healing. And he kept telling me that these giant demonic creatures were chasing him everywhere, which were his angels. He didn't see the darkness around him because the darkness around him was something that he had gotten used to. It was a vibration he had gotten used to, so it was invisible to him. So let's think about this for a second. Let's just think about this, and I'm going to put a pin in that. Let's think about our everyday life. And, a lot of us have some pretty tough things we got to deal with in life. And when we need to deal with those issues that come up, if we are in a rough environment that may inspire out of us actions we normally wouldn't take, that we feel at a later time maybe compromised our cool or compromised our integrity or whatever. Crap happens in life. And sometimes we just have to, as my friend Holly would say, sometimes you just have to make the best wrong choice that you can, given the wrong choices you're presented with, So we think about this. We as human beings can literally, like the frog in the boiling pot, we can get boiled a quarter of a degree at a time in the roil of darkness or low vibration or fear or sketchy energy or however you want to look at that. And we in our everyday life have this happen. I mean, how many times have you actually gotten to a space in your life, in your past or maybe now, and you realize, oh my gosh, this job that I've had has completely compromised my integrity. Or this relationship that I've gone into, I have allowed my integrity to be compromised. Or to take that even a step further. How many of us have gotten out there and pretty soon it's the habit to compromise our integrity, right? So, this happens in our everyday life, gang, and all of a sudden we wake up and we have that freaky John Hughes epiphany moment and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe I turned into this creep and we go to 50,000 yoga classes and we get a bunch of, we get exercised and we do our penance and we go to church or whatever it is. Go work out, whatever. So you can imagine that a disembodied spirit who has disembodied itself while it's carrying all this shame and fear and it's being surrounded in this dark stuff, which it doesn't know what's going on. It just knows it's weird and it feels weird. You can imagine how confusing it is to have some chick standing there saying, hey, you've been out of your spacesuit for 350 years, and it's time you move on instead of tormenting the people you live with. So this is another interesting factor. When we look at how does a good ghost go bad, a lot of times a question that I will get from people whose homes are occupied by unhappy spirits, and if I may just put this out there, that honest to God does not happen very often, gang. It really doesn't. It's much more common for a spirit to be disembodied, go out into the world, and kind of like its afterlife. People, disembodied spirits kind of dig sometimes being out there on their own and doing their own thing. So, with that being said, I'm dealing with this guy. I got to explain to him what's going on. He eventually ends up, as we talk about the different things that he had done, and this was a process, he ends up kind of huddled in a corner. And all of a sudden, he looks a lot more like a person and less like this weird 1930s vampire knockoff in a bad movie. And he's about, I would say 18 or 19 years old. And I see that he is being dramatically abused by someone in his life. I don't know who it was, but it was a clergy person. And so this man felt like he had this darkness in him that was imparted to him by, quite honestly, in this particular instance, this man had been sexually assaulted by another clergy person back in the day. And so he was carrying all this guilt and this shame. And then he began to be the predator because that's, as we know, that's a common, unfortunately, psychological application of abuse. So once he became this vulnerable, 18, 19-year-old guy, then we could have a rational conversation about why he was not a piece of dirt that was going to get drugged to hell. And this was about an hour and 20-minute long, 2-hour long discussion with this guy. And he finally decided that it was okay for him to go with his angels and cross over. And I had to speak with him in terms of his faith. And I asked this guy, I said, do you believe that the omnipotent God in heaven can make anything be, can allow you anything? And of course, yes, once this guy was out of his, Skeksis phase, then he could actually talk to me. And he said, of course, and Jesus is the almighty savior and is blah, 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 blah. And it was actually a little hard to understand him because he had some vernacular that was rough and a really funky accent, actually. So I'm talking to him, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, since Almighty God can allow anything, then have God, if you actually are punished and sent to hell, then ask God that your penance is to come haunt me for the rest of your life. If you were sent to hell, I give you permission to come back and terrorize me every day of the rest of your eternal soul's existence. And that's how you can work off some of your penance in hell. And he actually kind of cracked a smile, which is the first time that happened. And basically, long story short, he says, okay, and off he goes. And he didn't come back. And I talked to these people, and they never had him back. And it was an older home, and the home is on the East Coast. So, that's kind of par for the course for some of those vortex portals. Yet a good ghost can go bad when we decide to bring with us really twisted up stuff upon our death. And let me tell you, gang, it's really, 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 really hard to do that. It's hard. It's hard to grab the old spiritual cervix and not go on to the next side. It takes a tremendous amount of effort. And if you think about human beings, we exact a lot of effort if we're super afraid, right? I mean, look at our world right now. We've got all these folks that are making these outrageous claims one way or the other in the world because they are very, very frightened. We have all kinds of things going on because people are very frightened. Fear is a big motivator. And there's a really strange little window when we cross over, when our body dies, and here comes this big white tunnel, this white light, this flood of love, this unbelievable peace that comes over people. I mean, it's like the closest I think I could probably akin it to is I have some clients who have recovered from heroin addiction. And I asked them, I said, I've never been drawn to drugs like heroin and whatnot. And I've asked these clients, what does it feel like? And they've begun to explain it to me. And I have spiritually or energetically tuned into their energy field and felt what it feels like to be on heroin. And what I can tell you, it's like if you could drain every ounce of anxiety, pain, hesitation, fear, psychological distress, all of it, just out of your consciousness. I mean, it is a blissy feeling, which I can understand, I suppose, how people get hooked on that, considering that the world can be a touch challenging. Yet, when we are crossing over, that white light that comes for us fills us with 10 times that feeling. I mean, it is intense. It is nothing but pure love, pure acceptance, pure release. So you've got to figure, how self-hating must a spirit be to deny that? And we do have free will, gang. Again, it's not like God just whips out the old spiritual Hoover vacuum and sucks you out of your body and floop, up the tube you go like an interesting George Jetson cartoon, and poof, you're into heaven and there's old Rosie handing you a martini. It's not quite like that. So it's rare. It's rare that spirits actually have the spiritual power or wherewithal or determination to not go into the oneness with the one that is all. So if you do have a spirit knocking around your house, thanks to our fascinating, sensationalized television programming and our paranormal shows, we of course, tend to think, first of all, everything's a demon, which it's not. We think all ghosts are evil and bad and want to torment us, which they don't. Sometimes spirits are legitimately lost, especially people who die very suddenly and turn around and see their body laying on the floor. And that is just a shock to the system. It's a shock to the consciousness. And so the consciousness will matrix that out and be like, I'm not looking at that. That's ridiculous. And if you think that can't happen, let me tell you, my cousin Jason Kachardi, Jason lost his battle with depression years and years ago, and he took his own life. And I was pretty darn close to my cousin Jason. And I was living in Los Angeles, and Jason was in Montana. And he had a very challenging partner who was addicted to drugs, and it was very difficult for Jason because he was this massive empath, and he was gorgeous. He looked exactly like Rob Lowe. I mean, seriously, big old long curly eyelashes and just a beautiful human being on the inside and out, big healer. And it was around 2 p.m. in LA, and I had gotten out of the shower, and I was drying my hair and doing whatever I was doing. And this spirit walks around the corner and stands against the doorway and just looks at me and smiles. And that spirit looks exactly like my cousin Jason. I mean, dead freaking ringer. From his plaid shirt to his high-waisted jeans he used to wear, the stonewashed jeans in the 80s, remember those? And his, he had kind of that curly hair, and, he kind of liked the short in the front and a little longer in the back, party in the back, short in the front. And here was this spirit standing there, and I looked at him, and this guy with a big old gorgeous smile, just like Jason had. And of course, I'm buck raving naked because I'm blow drying my hair. Okay, just got out of the shower. And I looked at this spirit and I said, God, you look just like my cousin Jason. And this spirit laughs. And I mean, down to the gold chain. My cousin liked his gold chains Italian. He had his gold chain on. And I said, dude, you got to get the hell out of here. I mean, don't be a creeper and just watch me dry my hair, you weirdo. Get out of here. And here this spirit stood there, kind of with his foot up on the door jamb, just kind of with his arms crossed, looking at me, smiling, like he was waiting for something, right? Well, I go back and forth about 20 minutes of this, look, you look exactly like my cousin. Oh my God, I can't believe how much you look like my cousin Jason. Get the hell out of here, get the hell out of here. Finally, I start to ignore the spirit. And the spirit gets really, really sad and just looks at me for a while and still stays there. And I don't even look up. I'm like, dude, I am not looking at you. Just go, okay? You're creeping me out. So eventually the spirit just goes. And about, 45 minutes later, I get a call from my mom, and my mom says, your cousin Jason killed himself. And that blew me away because that was my cousin Jason who came by to say, hey man, how's it going? And by the way, spirits don't care if we're naked. They've moved on. So it's not like there was some weird thing going on. Honest to God. It's like a dog looking at you when you're naked. It doesn't care. Spirits don't care. Not unless it's a succubus. And that goes into the elemental category. And that's a whole different topic. That's a different podcast. But my brain gang, I mean, that was my cousin. I talk to dead people and my brain matrixed that out. There was no way, even though I was looking at my cousin, that my brain could translate that as my cousin. Because as far as I knew, he's much younger than me. He was in Montana. So when people say, well, how is it possible that you can get in a car accident and instantly have your flesh suit stop working and instantly have the body be killed, yet you're wandering around on the side of the road going, what's happening, what's happening? I mean, if you're a spirit, can't you see your dead body? Well, yeah. Yet the brain, the consciousness, obviously we don't have a brain anymore, yet the consciousness is still putting things together. And here comes these angels coming in to try to scoop us up and take us somewhere. And we're like, what the hell are those things? And what am I doing? And so sometimes when I've encountered people who have had horrible accidents, then you've got to explain to them what happened. And that's not really a case of a spirit that's gone bad. That's just a case of a spirit that's freaked out and lost, and its consciousness is matrixing, this isn't happening, this isn't happening, this isn't happening. And again, keep in mind that our consciousness determines our reality, okay? So again, to recap, it's not like we go flying out of our body and we're just sucked up into the big Hoover vacuum into heaven and off we go. There's a period of release. There's a period of conscious acceptance as we go into the next phase of our life. And, I'm really looking forward when it's my time to get my card punched and I head off to the party barge. I'm just going to relax into that process because just the little teeny bits that I've gotten to feel from that euphoria that comes with the connection of the hereafter, that's something I want to be a part of. Yet if I'm somebody who hates myself, pretend that I am, then I'm not going to want all that love, right? That's going to freak me right out, and I'm going to arm lock that. So good spirits can go bad. Good people can take on bad behaviors when we separate ourselves from love and when we separate ourselves from light. And, here we're filming Road Angel, and we do happen upon spirits. And the Road Angel is not necessarily a paranormally driven television show. We do run into spirits in the work that we're doing. And those spirits always still have their angels with them. And sometimes those angels are just looking at me like, can you help me with this? It's like trying to trap a gerbil in a room full of chairs. It just keeps running all over the place, and we're really having a hard time getting this one corralled. So do know that if you have an occupation in your home, it is highly unlikely that it's a human spirit that's gone, quote, bad or gone septic or gone a little nutso, being separated out into this ether and being surrounded in darkness that it can't even see. Sometimes the darkness will actually take on identities with that person because it wants that person to stay. So sometimes the darkness will become projections of, like in a bad holodeck, a person in that life that tormented that individual. Because darkness can't create anything in front of us that we have not created in our mind first. Darkness always has to work off of our own template of horrors, and then it can take that on, if we're going to bite on it. Yet it'll try it on and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, it'll try it on something else. And sometimes it just remains anonymous and just hangs out and eats the pain off of this disembodied spirit. So, light is always working on our behalf. God, Mother, Father, God, however you look at the quantum field, is always working on our behalf. Always. Yet it becomes very challenging for us to move ourselves to the next portion of our life if we're going in fear. And this is one of the healing modalities that I happen to see in folks who are hospice nurses, the hospice doctors, end-of-life doulas. These are the people who stand in the gap between worlds. And I've been there. I've been there when people have crossed out of their body. It is wild. And I've been there while, somebody says, hold my hand or be with me or whatnot. And you can feel this rush that just leaves. And when normally we transition and are birthed into the next phase of our life as a spirit being, that's normally a really good feeling, even though it's sad for everybody who's standing around the body. When it very first happens, there's just this amazing awe. Like, whoa, because everybody feels the transfiguration. Now we're talking if somebody's expected to cross over and they have family around them and whatnot. That's a different story. If there's an accident, obviously there's trauma. That's a whole different spiritual lesson. So I wanted to do this podcast about how a good spirit goes bad, because it also wraps around to how easy it is for we as human beings to allow ourselves to become obsessed with not crossing over into healthy aspects of our life. And eventually ending up like that frog that's boiled 1 degree at a time, we end up in a dark place. And our angels are trying to help us the whole time. And they're like, oh, Lord, they're going through that personal horror again. So they're trying to help us. And sometimes we just don't want to take the help. So just know this: if you have something going bump in the night in your house, It may not even be a person. You might have an elemental being that's bent out of shape because you cut all the trees down. You might have, every once in a while, we have certain off-world races, extraterrestrial races that come through and kind of rattle a few things in the ethers. Yet if you feel like you have a person in your house, and that's always that weird, like something looking at you feeling, like when you walk into a department store and you're like, oh man, the sales lady, she's pinpointed me. And you can feel those eyes in your back and you turn around and, she's descending on you. Can I help you? And here's 19 blouses. And you're like, oh man, I just wanted to look at the sale rack. What's going on? Human spirits connect with us in a way that pings us and lets us know they're there. So if you happen to be feeling something looking at you, whether it's in the light or the dark, talk to it. Just talk to it and say, what in the heck? How can I help you? How can I help you? You obviously need to chat. Is there something I can help you with? And if it's just creepy feeling and you don't like the way it feels, you can say, I can sense that you're here. And I have to tell you that I don't like your vibration. So if you're not going to participate with me in love, you have to leave because I am not going to participate with you. And that's a whole thing, And again, unless we have a real problem child, so to speak, a spirit that's had a lot of practice being disembodied and not connecting, that doesn't happen very often, okay? So I kind of felt a responsibility to have to explain all of this because I've done a lot of paranormal work. And though I never sensationalized it, there are some things out there and some spirits out there that are a little disturbed, or are reliving disturbing components in their life because they just can't remove that piece of their psyche, emotionally, because that's all vibration, to cross over. It's rough. And I do think also, this is another thing, I have witnessed with people's angels who are standing with these disembodied people. I have witnessed these folks, these angels, telling me their story. And sometimes, and this is again, it's a kind of a rare deal. I ran into 2 of these spirits in Montgomery House when we shot the documentary that are reliving their trauma. It's part of their soul lesson to figure out how to deal with some of this trauma. And that just gets super duper weird. I mean, that kind of crosses over into a whole different thing. So there's a million reasons why people might hang around, but most of the time we go. We go because it feels good. We go because it feels normal. Most babies coming down the birth canal just come out. And once in a while, one might go breech and we got to kind of reach up there and turn the baby around and, tuck its head a little bit and give it a little bit of help. But think about how many babies just shoot down that birth canal, and that is really more so the way that it goes with us when we are birthing into the other side. That's one thing I'm really, really proud about with our Road Angel TV show is that whatever I'm doing, it's just whatever's happening. There's the producer, Mary Erickson, she's not over there telling me to play it up for the camera. And our production manager, Melissa Siana, all of us are very, very dedicated to just the beauty and the transcendent quality of what can happen when we allow the spirit to heal. And sometimes that means with dealing with some pretty gnarly stuff. And I do deal with gnarly stuff. And there are spirits that come forward when we're dealing with people's angelic life or dealing with clearing spaces. Yet, I started telling a story earlier, and we just have a few more minutes, about the sensationalized nature of some of the TV shows in the mid to late 2000s in the paranormal, realm. And there was one particular television show that I had worked with another individual who had been on a big A&E show. And we had put together a show and pitched it to a network. And that show ended up getting picked up, even with the title that we gave them. Yet they recast the whole show. So they put in a different psychic instead of me, one that really, really is quite out there and plays it up, and a very different type of spirit worker than I am. Much more, just way outside the box. And, everything's a demon and everything is terrible and everything's whatever. And they replaced this other person who was on the A&E show with an individual that was basically a knockoff character of this person who was kind of a famous paranormal star. And this show is still on the air. Yet when I look at it, and it's just going to remain nameless, but when I look at this show, I think about, first I was super butthurt, obviously, when the show came out. And I'm like, oh my God, that's my show. And they literally recast me with somebody who doesn't even, who's a very different type of spirit worker than I am. Very different type of psychic. And it's still on the air. And I look at this and I think to myself, that show was never meant for me, because there's no way that I could have hung in there and created that level of sensationalism in the paranormal with that producing group. I mean, there just isn't. I'm not wired like that, gang. I think that real life is way creepier than fake life. I think that real miracles are way more amazing than things we can come up with and try to Hollywood concoct. So I guess I just felt some semblance of responsibility, having done so much paranormal work and a lot of it on camera. And it was all, again, coming from a place of education for people. Yet I really wanted to make sure that people understood that a good spirit doesn't just go bad. And a good person doesn't just go bad. You gotta have the right soup of tough lessons. So this week, when you go into the world, if you feel anything going bump in the night, just realize it may not even be a human. It might be something passing through. Yet recognize that not everything that we can't see is evil. And if there is something weird out there, we don't want to be putting the evil smokestack into the ethers, because that basically calls in what we're afraid of. Understand that we are creatures of light, and we can relax into birthing into our next incarnation. And that's what these angels tell me all the time. And that's what I get to see all the time. So it's not as creepy as we'd like to think. Although once in a while, you get some really good evidence on camera. I gotta tell you. All right, gang, everybody, go have a light-filled day. Go have a light-filled existence. Go be light in everything you touch. Recognize you're a creature of light. And I will see you next week.